Canal that delivers water to more than 1 million acres of California farmland has sunk 12 feet into the ground. Not cracked, not crumbled, sunk. 12 feet of concrete artery pulled straight down into the earth it was built on top of, choking off more than 60% of everything it was ever meant to carry. 12 feet, over a 25-mile stretch, 1 inch a month at its worst. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The Friant-Kern Canal did not fail from the top. It did not crack open the way a burst pipe cracks open. The concrete is largely intact. The walls held. What gave way was the ground. The land underneath it dropped, and the canal went down with it, sagging into a hole the earth dug for itself. The structure is fine. The planet it sits on is not. So here's the question the farmers along this canal are living with right now. What do you do when the thing carrying your water is perfectly built, perfectly maintained, and still failing? Because the only part you cannot fix is the ground it rests on. Let that land, because the canal is not even the worst of it. 10 miles of this canal were just rebuilt for $325 million. Finished, ribbon cut, celebrated, and that brand new 10-mile stretch has already started sinking again. The fix is already failing. That is where this is going. Hold on to it. First, the number, 12 feet. That sounds like a measurement. It is not. It is a wall. Stand at the bottom of a sunk section of the Friant-Kern Canal, and the ground around you has dropped the height of a 1-story building since the day this canal opened. Picture a basketball hoop. Now picture the rim 10 feet up and then 2 more feet above that. That is how far the earth has fallen out from under this water. Not in a landslide, not in an earthquake, slowly, quietly, 1 inch at a time, month after month, for decades, until 12 feet of California simply was not there anymore. The canal runs 152 miles. It was built by the United States Bureau of Reclamation and finished in 1951. It carries water from the San Joaquin River out of Millerton Lake, down the dry east side of the San Joaquin Valley, through Fresno, Tulare, and Kern counties to the farms and towns that grow a staggering share of the food on the American table. That is the job. Move water south. Keep the valley alive. And for a while, it worked exactly as designed. But to understand why it is failing, you have to understand what is pulling it down. Because the canal sinking is not the disaster. It is the symptom of a disaster. Here is the mechanism, and it is brutal in its simplicity. The valley floor is built on layers of sand and clay, stacked like a deck of cards, soaked with groundwater. When farmers pump that groundwater out faster than the rain, and the rivers can put it back, the water pressure in those layers drops. The clay loses the water that was holding it open, and then the clay collapses. It compresses, it packs down on itself, and it does not spring back. The ground above it has nowhere to go but down. That is subsidence. That is the word for the earth deflating like a slow leak in a tire, except the tire is the floor of one of the most productive farming regions on the planet. And the canal is sitting right on top of it. So watch the loop, because the loop is the cruelty of the whole thing. Drought hits, the canal cannot carry as much water because it has already sunk. So the farmers pump more groundwater to make up the difference. The pumping sinks the ground further, which sinks the canal further, which means it carries even less water, which means even more pumping. The canal is being strangled by the exact behavior that its own failure creates. It is a machine for its own destruction, and every dry year tightens the noose. The worst of it came during the Great Droughts. The Bureau of Reclamation points to the years when pumping rebounded to record levels, when the rivers ran low and the wells ran hard. 3 of those 12 feet of sinking happened in just 3 years between 2014 and 2017. 3 feet of earth gone in 36 months. This is the part nobody puts on the news. The canal does not have to be carrying the wrong amount of water for this to be a catastrophe. It is the asset itself that is failing. Designed to move 4,000 cubic feet of water every second through its affected middle reach. Today, through the choke point, it carries about 1,600. Say that out loud. 4,000 down to 1,600. More than 60% of the canal's capacity gone. Not damaged, not temporarily reduced, gone because the channel physically sank below the level the water needs to flow. And it is going to get worse. That is not a fear. That is a measurement. And the measurement is still moving. Because here is the thing about subsidence. It does not stabilize on its own. The ground does not decide it has fallen far enough. As long as the pumping continues, as long as the dry years keep coming, the clay keeps compressing and the canal keeps dropping. There is no natural floor waiting to catch it. The Bureau of Reclamation knows this so well that when they designed the repair, they did not design it to handle the subsidence that has already happened. They designed it to absorb 5 more feet of sinking they expect is still coming. Read that again. The official plan does not assume the ground will stop. It assumes the ground will fall another 5 feet, and it tries to build a canal that can survive it. That is the difference between a disaster and a bad year. A bad year ends. This does not have an end built into it. Now go back to the beginning, because this canal was supposed to be a triumph, and for a long time it was. When the Bureau of Reclamation finished the Friant-Kern in 1951, it was a piece of engineering that turned a dry valley into an agricultural empire. 152 miles of concrete, pulling San Joaquin River water south, watering ground that had no business growing anything. It built towns. It built irrigation districts. It built generations of farming families who planted citrus and almonds and pistachios because the canal promised the water would always come. The canal had margin. It was designed to carry 4,000 cubic feet per second through its middle reach, with room to spare. And then, year by year, the valley pumped that margin into the ground, literally into the ground. The water came out of the aquifer collapsed, and the very canal that was supposed to deliver surface water so farmers would not have to pump became a victim of the pumping it was built to prevent. The thing designed to stop the problem was killed by the problem. By August of 2017, the reporting was blunt. The canal had slowed by 60%. Subsidence to blame. The record this canal broke was its own. And here is where you meet the people who actually pay for it, because a sinking canal is an abstraction until you stand in the towns it was built to feed. This canal is the water supply for more than 1 million acres of farmland and more than 250,000 residents. These are not numbers on a federal spreadsheet. These are real places. Orange Cove, up at the top of the canal, drawing its water from the source. Exeter, where the irrigation district pulls from the canal. Lindsay, leaning on it for the water that comes out of the tap. Strathmore, where they keep the canal shallow on purpose just to make the delivery reach. Terabella, where the ground broke open for the repair. Porterville, in the service area depending on it like all the rest. And all the way south, the canals end at Arvin in Kern County, Fresno to Tulare to Kern, a line of towns strung along 152 miles of concrete, every single one of them assuming the water shows up. And in the middle of all of it, Between milepost 88 and milepost 121 sits the wound, 33 miles of canal where the ground sank out from under the water, the middle reach, the choke point, the place where a federal artery built to carry the lifeblood of the valley quietly dropped into the earth. So let me teach you the word that engineers use for what is happening here, because once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. Subsidence. It is not erosion, which washes the surface away. It is not a sinkhole, which collapses all at once. Subsidence is the ground itself losing volume from the inside, compacting downward as the water that propped it up gets pulled out. And the United States Geological Survey has been watching it happen on this exact canal. Michelle Sneed is a hydrologist with the United States Geological Survey, and she described the Friant-Kern in plain words, her words. With subsidence, there's a section of the canal, about a 25-mile section of the canal, that's dropped down in elevation. End quote. She described the rate at its peak as roughly 1 inch per month, and she called it very rapid, 1 inch a month. Picture that. Not over a lifetime. Every 30 days, another inch of the canal gone under, and Sneed, who studies this for the federal government, used the words very rapid to describe a piece of national infrastructure descending into the earth. And the operators who run the canal say the same thing in their own words. Doug DeFlitch of the Friant Water Authority laid out the cost. His words, every time that it goes down, it decreases our capacity to move water down below that point. We estimate that decreases are about 60% of the designed full capacity of the canal. End quote. 60% from the people who actually run it. But the most vivid description of all came from the field engineer who had to figure out how to fix it. Scott Wolfert, a field engineer with the Bureau of Reclamation, stood in front of the sunk section and did not reach for a technical term, his words. It's got a big belly in the middle of it right now, so you can't get as much water conveyed through. And that's what we are fixing specifically on this job. End quote. A big belly, a sag in the spine of the canal where the water pools and slows and backs up, because the channel has dropped below the grade the engineers gave it 70 years ago. Now here's where the story turns from a natural process into a human one, because the ground did not do this alone. The ground was helped. The subsidence is real geology. But the pumping that drives it is a choice, stacked on top of a choice, stacked on top of a choice. Every dry year, more farmers reach for the aquifer. Every collapsed clay layer is the fingerprint of a well that ran too long. The valley grew its way into this. It planted permanent crops that cannot go a season without water, trees that have to be irrigated whether the canal is full or not, and when the canal could not deliver, the only place left to get the water was straight down, out of the ground, out of the very layers holding the canal up. Nature built the clay. People emptied it. And so the disaster climbs the ladder level by level. Start local. A single farm near the choke point gets less water because the canal sank. Step up. The whole middle reach, 33 miles of it, runs at about 40% of what it was built for. Step up again. The irrigation districts, Exeter, Terabella, Porterville, scramble to make up the shortfall, and they do it by pumping, which sinks the ground further. Step up once more. The valley loses as much as 300,000 acre feet of water deliveries in a single water year, water that simply does not arrive because the canal cannot carry it. And step up to the top. This is some of the most productive farmland in the United States, feeding the country, and its primary surface water artery is operating at a fraction of its design while the ground keeps swallowing it. That is where a local story becomes a national one. The citrus, the almonds, the pistachios of the East Valley do not care that the concrete is technically fine. They need the water, and the water cannot get there. Now watch the government try to fix it, because the response is enormous, and it still cannot beat the ground. The state moved first. California State Senator Melissa Hurtado introduced a bipartisan $400 million bill to fix the canal back in 2020. California's Department of Water Resources released funds for repairs in March of 2022. Then the federal machine turned over. The Bureau of Reclamation awarded the construction contract. Crews broke ground in January of 2022 west of Terabella. They moved roughly 4 million cubic yards of earth, 4 million. And on June 21st, 2024, they cut the ribbon on phase 1. 10 miles of the worst hit canal rebuilt for $325 million, designed deliberately to absorb 5 more feet of subsidence. And then 2025 brought even more money, $200 million in federal funding, authorized through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed in 2025, with the Interior Department announcing the broader $889 million Western Water Package that includes it in March of 2026. Phase 2 funding started flowing too, more than $22 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law, hundreds of millions of state dollars, hundreds of millions of federal dollars, a construction effort that moved 4 million cubic yards of California. And here is the line that should chill you. None of it can stop the ground from sinking. Because here is the part nobody put in the ribbon-cutting press release. That brand new 10-mile stretch, the $325 million fix, finished and celebrated in June of 2024, had already dropped about 1 more foot after construction. The rebuilt canal, designed to handle 5 feet of future subsidence, started spending that margin almost immediately. That single foot of new sinking cost roughly 250 cubic feet per second of the capacity they had just spent years and $350 million restoring. Read that one more time. They fixed it. And it started sinking again before the celebration was over. This is the second subject I told you to hold on to, and now you see why. The fix is not a cure. The fix is a head start in a race against a ground that does not stop running. This is what the present chief executive of the Friant Water Authority, Johnny Amaral, is talking about when he calls the canal a lifeline. His words: the Friant-Kern Canal is a lifeline for farms, communities, and groundwater recharge efforts. This funding will have a lasting impact on the communities we serve. End quote. A lasting impact on a canal that is, by the federal government's own design assumptions, expected to keep sinking another 5 feet. Now let me bring you down to the human scale, because the numbers only carry you so far. Picture the grower at the bottom of the middle reach, the one whose land sits below milepost 121. The canal that is supposed to bring his water has a big belly upstream of his fields, a sag where the water backs up and slows down and never quite reaches him at the volume it used to. He did everything right. He planted where the federal canal promised water. His grandfather planted there. And now the only way he keeps his trees alive is to drill and pump and pull the water out of the same ground that is sinking the canal that was supposed to mean he never had to. Every gallon he pumps to save this year sinks the canal a little more next year. He is paying for his own water twice, and the second payment is the ground itself. Here's the stat cluster. The The numbers stacked end to end, the court exhibit, 152 miles of canal, built in 1951, sunk 12 feet over a 25-mile stretch. 3 of those feet in just 3 years, from 2014 to 2017, about 1 inch per month at its peak, designed for 4,000 cubic feet per second, now carrying about 1,600, more than 60% of capacity gone, 33 miles ruined, as much as 300,000 acre-feet of water lost in a single year, more than 1 million acres of farmland fed, 250,000 people, $325 million for the first 10 miles, $200 million in federal money in 2025. And the rebuilt stretch already dropped 1 more foot. So here are the questions the people of the San Joaquin Valley are living with right now. What does the food supply of the United States look like when its primary East Valley artery runs permanently at 40% and the fix keeps sinking the moment you finish it? When does the pumping that sinks the canal stop being something you do in a drought and start being the only way the valley survives at all? And if $250 million and 4 million cubic yards of moved earth cannot keep the ground from falling another foot, what exactly is the plan for the next dry decade and the one after that? Stand on the bank of the Middle Reach in the heat. The concrete is intact, gray, and solid, and exactly where the engineers poured it, and it is still sagging into the earth. The water is still backing up behind the choke point, sitting where it was never supposed to sit, pooling in the belly of the canal, going nowhere. $200 million are on the way. The first 10 miles are already a foot lower than the day they were finished. And tonight, somewhere under Tulare County in the dark, the ground is still inhaling, still pulling the clay down on itself, still dragging the canal with it, 1 inch at a time. A $400 million